Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Tuesday at about 9, or I should say 10:13. Hope everyone's doing good. We uh, we've been in a really great space as far as weather goes. The weather has been pretty fantastic. Finally, here in Midcoast, Maine, it actually is rather spring-like. So it's about time, and it's been nice. So I hope everyone's doing good. The Some big couple of things I want to talk about before we get into this awesome movie. This Friday at 5:30, Quantum, my band Quantum, will be playing at the Poor Farm. It's a free show. Hopefully the weather is good. We'll see. Uh, we're going to be playing at the Poor Farm, which is a right in Union, Maine. It's about, I live here in Northport. It's about a 35-minute drive. It's pretty close. It's a really great, really awesome place. It is a nano brewery. They make their own beer there. They sometimes have food trucks, but I think that is that won't be a thing until the summertime officially gets here. But awesome place. It's a beautiful venue that is kind of nestled back in the woods. Bill, who is the owner, he's a super cool guy, and we've played there. I think this is going to be our fourth gig playing there, and it's been a lot of fun. We've had some really great shows there, and I've always been, at first when before we started playing there, I never thought it would be a place that would, host a band like ours. I always felt like it's gonna, it was more geared towards at least the music that they've had there, and I was fortunate to have played there a pretty decent amount of times with some other bands. And usually that stuff is more rock based or folk rock based Americana kind of stuff, and more traditional kind of conventional music that you would see here in Midcoast. So I was really pleasantly surprised after getting to know Bill and a couple other things around that place that he was very open to having something that's not, I guess, conventional in terms of, or compared to the bands that they would have there. And I found, after getting to know Bill, that he has incredibly eclectic tastes. He's into all kinds of stuff. So very very cool. So we'll be there this Friday at 5:30. Hopefully the weather's good, because if the weather's good, we will be playing outside, and they have this gorgeous deck outside of the Poor Farm itself that we've played outside a few times. Only one time. The last two times we played there, the weather wasn't very good, so we ended up having to play inside. But one time we played outside, and that was really great. We've played inside a few times, which is good, but the sound is a little bit wonky. It's a brew pub, so the machines are there making all kinds of popping sounds and what have you. So, but outside is pretty awesome. So hopefully the weather will be good. But we'll be doing a 2-hour set of all of our tunes, and we've been, this winter was good. We were, or this year and also last year. Last summer was really great because we got to play a lot of gigs, and we had our album release party. We kind of, I don't know, I kind of felt after last summer we kind of got to this new space, and I felt like we might have reached a little bit more of a newer audience, and we had just put out a new album, and it was really great. I felt like we were building, riding a little bit of momentum. So I wanted to like try to keep that momentum going into the technically I always think of it as like the off season, because we live in such a seasonal place. Usually like September, mid September or so, things for gig gig wise or gig opportunities, things tend to get pretty sparse. But luckily, this winter was pretty good. with a couple of new venues. Actually, this winter was really great with these new venues that have been. There's been about a couple. Well, there's been a couple new venues that have opened up over the winter that were having music, and a couple other places that were trying some new things as far as having music. So, which was fantastic for local musicians here. So, very very cool. Very surprising for these places to take these chances in the middle of winter because it's a long season. So, but it's been great. Um, but because I felt like we were Quantum was riding a little bit of momentum from last summer, I wanted to try to keep the band, somewhat active with gigs and things and trying to, I'm always trying to push that band and trying to really develop it all the time. So we ended up playing a pretty good amount of gigs that were, broken up, a little bit more on the sporadic side. But we played a pretty good amount of gigs in the technically the off season, which was great. We played at Ada's, and then we played a house party. We played a show at this newer venue that is just a real serious hotspot now for music at the Gypsy Rose. We also played another gig at the Poor Farm. We just did a show on the radio last weekend, which was a super fun time. We and then we also played at Myrtle Street Tavern in Rockland. So we've been, you know, trying to stay a little bit more active, at least locally, and it's been cool, like being able to have some gigs and other things. And we've been rehearsing every week. We usually rehearse every Thursday, and the gigs have been, you know, a few times a month or whatever. So, but there's been a lot of new songs I've been writing, and so it's been really cool. And so it's been great trying to work on that material. And the last few gigs we were able to kind of test those songs out live. So that's one of the things too I love about playing gigs is, and I've said before, like to me that's like the ultimate testing ground to see if the material actually carries a little bit of weight or can resonate with people or not. So, and I really, from a writing perspective, for me at least, I really feel from a writing perspective, playing those tunes live when I feel like I've arrived to where I have new material, performing those songs live really makes or breaks those songs. I learn so much because, you know, with having an audience there, seeing how their reactions are, whether they like the stuff or they don't, or, you know, just to see if it can carry water outside of, say, just the rehearsal space. So it's super cool. I learned so much from playing gigs, doing doing that kind of thing. To me, that's the greatest part of it and the most fun. But then also the biggest, for me, the biggest learning curve. You know, about how to develop the material and to push the sound into new directions and finding things that, or realizing things that don't work and then things that do work. So if you're around this weekend or this coming weekend, come on by. It's a free show, so yeah, it'll be a good time. And yesterday I had the big I uploaded the video. I just did a really super fun show where I was really fortunate to have a really special guest on Film Fanatic. Again, it's something that I love more than anything. It's when it comes to the videos that I do, and that is the interview segment. And I was able to get Lynn Griffin as a guest on Film Fanatic for my YouTube channel. I recorded the video on Sunday and I uploaded it yesterday. She was fantastic. She's one of the lead actress in Black Christmas from 1974. It's a Canadian slasher movie, and she was really awesome, really flexible. I had a lot of problems getting the show up and running when when we recorded it because of my connection and a couple other things. So we ended up having a later start than I want than we than we started about a half hour, 35 minutes late, too late, past the mark that we had past the time we had set. But she was super cool, super flexible. She was an amazing guest, and I was like I said in that video, I was very late to the game in discovering Black Christmas. The slasher genre in the horror exploitation world is like by far my favorite style of filmmaking. And Black Christmas, again, I just bought it, just watched it. I had heard about that movie for a few years, and I just couldn't believe that I just recently actually saw it for the first time and discovered it. And it is a real monumental movie in that genre. I think it's one of the most important horror movies ever made, and I really think overall in the slasher genre, I think it's probably it might be the most pop or the most important movie in the genre. It's my favorite genre. I'm always into the thing of trying to, if I like a certain style of music or whatever it is, I always love to see, what influenced those particular artists that I really look up to. And so I like to trace the lineage back. And I feel like Black Christmas is that. Like that's the kind of the seed and the blueprint for what slasher films became in the 70s. And so it was really eye opening to talk to her about this. So and obviously before Black Christmas came out, which came out in 1974, there were movies that came before that I considered to be more or less slasher films. I think films like certain films that were put out by Herschel Gordon Lewis, for instance, Blood Feast and Color Me Blood Red, are definitely like slasher movies. But I really think that with the emergence of Black Christmas, which came out in 74, quite a few years later, I really feel like that movie really solidified kind of the template or the blueprint for what the slasher genre is. And I feel like when that movie came out, it had this real formalized plan of attack behind it. And I think that movie was monumental. Probably the most important movie in the slasher genre as far as being really ahead of its time. So it was great. So I uploaded the video yesterday. So please check it out. And that's the thing I really want to do moving forward with this channel is have some real have some really cool guests on the show that are I feel for this whole genre and for this channel, people that are were really a part of some of these amazing films, and to try to elevate the level of where this channel is or where it's going, to really have that as kind of the main thing. It will take some time to obviously it takes time to organize and schedule actors and actresses and directors and people who work on these films, because just of scheduling, and they're at a little bit of a higher level, so I feel like it's a little bit harder to schedule and to track down. Just for instance, getting Lynn Griffin on the show, that was actually pretty easy. It was mainly the technical things on my part that were the hardest part. But her schedule, for instance, she is constantly going to horror conventions, and she's traveling. She's on the road about 6 months out of the year, doing all these conventions, and she does all these podcasts. So, a lot of these people that were part of these films, they're still very active. So, so that's where I want to. That's kind of the. I'm hoping that this is the start to to this like new phase or this next phase as to where I want to take this channel and the direction I want to go. So today's show is a movie that again I just discovered this film. Well, I've had this movie for about 3 years, and that is Homicidal by one of the one of the most iconic directors in horror and the horror exploitation world, William Castle. I got this collection at Bull Moose. This has two of his films on it, Homicidal and Mr. Sardonicus. These are just incredible movies. And today I'm going to be focusing on Homicidal. William Castle. This is such a horror classic. And it has, such a low budget quality. It's all black and white. And it was interesting how I discovered this film and also William Castle for that matter. So there was a movie, the way I knew who William Castle was, but I initially kind of forgot about his name and wasn't super familiar with his body of work. But the way I got really introduced to him again was from a movie that came out in 2016 called The Eyes of My Mother, which is just an incredible movie. It is one of the best, more modern day horror films that's come out, period, I think. And it's a movie that I will eventually do a show on. And it was directed by Nicholas Press, who I have not seen any of his other films. I've only seen this movie. I know he did. The last film he did is he did a remake of The Ring, which I heard wasn't so good, but I will eventually see it because I feel like The Eyes of My Mother is kind of a horror masterpiece. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. I'm going to do a show on that. But the way I discovered, or I should say rediscovered William Castle, and specifically around this film, Homicidal, is there's a really, I own The Eyes of My Mother. I have a really great Blu-ray version of that film. And again, it's just an amazing film. There's a really great interview with Nicholas Peace in it, and he talks about, his influences and what he was into and what inspired this film that he made. And he talked a lot, he talked mostly about William Castle. And he talked a lot about The House on Haunted Hill, which, again, is probably the most popular movie that William Castle ever directed or created. And that starred Vincent Price, one of the greatest, super low budget horror movies from the 60s. Iconic movie. One of, Vincent Price's best roles. And he talked, mostly about William Castle in this interview and how that film really, that movie in particular, The House on Haunted Hill, but the whole body of work of William Castle really inspired The Eyes of My Mother. William Castle, most of his films, I think all of his films were shot in black and white. They all came out in the late 50s, mid 50s to the early 60s. Homicidal is also in black and white. And Eyes of My Mother is shot in black and white. So there's a lot of similarities. Everything has this very gothic kind of texture to it. So after I saw that interview, I was like, I need to really check out, because I loved Eyes of My Mother so much, I was like, I need to really check out William Castle. I need to dive into that a little bit more. So, which I did, and so awesome. I was so incredibly excited. This movie, Homicidal, came out in 1961. The cast consists of Joan Marshall, Alan Bunce, Glenn Corbett, Richard Rust, Patricia Breslin, Eugene Leontovich, Gilbert Green. This movie is so freaking ahead of its time. Like, and the premise of it is basically centered on this woman who is turning into this homicidal maniac. Chaos and danger reign when good girl Miriam Webster, Patricia Breslin, meets her half brother's girlfriend, Emily, a mysterious blonde bombshell living at her family's Southern California estate. Emily serves as the nurse for the siblings' aging and wheelchair using guardian. Helga Swenson, she is not. However, as sweet as she seems, Emily soon reveals herself to be a murderous schemer who will stop at nothing to steal Miriam's extensive inheritance. And again, there's a this movie I definitely consider to be a slasher film. You know, and this came out in '61, and it's all shot in black and white. It's gorgeous, like it's just gorgeous. The kill scene in it happens about maybe 20 minutes into the movie, and the kill scene is like really intense and actually really graphic. And to think that this came out in '61, it's pretty gory, it's pretty intense, and it's pretty over the top. You know, just kind of really, I was really surprised. And of course, William Castle, you know, one I definitely feel like he's up there with, you know, all of the great figures that came out of the low budget horror world, the exploitation horror world, and what have you. He's definitely William Castle was definitely one of the iconic figures that helped shape the world of horror. Right up there with, you know, people like Roger Corman. I even think like Herschel Gordon Lewis. You know, incredibly, he was an incredibly important figure. He was an American film director, producer, screenwriter, and actor. He dropped out of high school at 15 to work in the theater. He came to the attention of Columbia Pictures for his talent and promotion, and then he was hired. And his film list is massive. Coney Island, which came out in 1939, which was a documentary. Black Marketing, another documentary. He started off making these documentaries, which is really interesting. That came out in 1943. Klondike Kate in 1943. The Chance of a Lifetime, 1943. The Whistler, 1944. She's a Soldier too, 1944. When Strangers Marry, 1944. The Mark of the Whistler, 1944. Geez, so many movies. Voice of the Whistler, 1945. Crime Doctor's Warning, 1945. Return of Rusty, 1946. Texas, Brooklyn in Heaven, 1948. Undertow, 1949. I mean, decades. It's crazy. Serpent of the Nile, 1953. Slaves of Babylon, 1953. Masterson of Kansas, 1954. The Battle of Rogue River, and also in '54. Jesse James versus the Daltons in 1954. The Drums of Tahiti in 1954 also. Uh, Macabre in 1958. And of course, like I mentioned, House on Haunted Hill, 1959. The Tingler in 1959, also 13 Ghosts. There's been two remakes of of two of his films that I know of. 13 Ghosts was a remake that came out maybe 10 years ago. And also there was a remake for House on Haunted Hill. Homicidal, this movie here, 61. Mr. Sardonicus, 60, also 61. 13 Frightened Girls in '63. The Old Dark House, also in '63. Straight Jacket, 64. The Night Walker, 64. Let's Kill Uncle, 1966. Shanks in 1974. I mean, just movie after movie after movie. He was so prolific, mostly as a director. I mean, the list that I'm reading off is almost so lengthy that it would take an entire show. And this is just his body of work as a director. I mean, just amazing. And Homicidal, like I said, it is there's a real interesting plot twist to this film, and it really kind of evolves around or involves this character who is essentially transgender. And I don't want to go into it too much because it's such a great twist in the story, but it's amazing and, so ahead of its time. And again, this is definitely a real gothic horror kind of exploitation experience. This came out in 61, and again, it's even by today's standards, I think it pushes the envelope. But it's so well done. The direction is masterful. The cinematography is just incredible. The black and white just looks is just breathtaking. And this collection is pretty good. It does, unfortunately, it doesn't really have any special features on here, but I got this really cheap. And the transfers of both of these movies is pretty incredible on Blu-ray. Like, this is a really great addition. And I can't recommend, like, if you're definitely, I think, checking out William Castle, if you're a fan of horror movies, he is definitely one of the most important filmmakers, and I think one of the most iconic and also one of the most influential filmmakers in all of horror. And he was ahead of his time, and I really recommend checking out his films. There's a lot of similarities between this and Psycho, which is interesting. Very, very different, but it has that kind of flavor. But Homicidal, 1961, just an amazing film. William Castle, again, one of the greats in horror. A real pioneer. Huge. Like I said, I was reading the list. I could spend an entire show just reading a list of films that not only was he an actor, but he also produced a whole ton of movies. But as a director, I mean, just insane. And I think his heart. He did. He started off as making documentaries, and he also made. He bounced around different genres. He made westerns. He made like crime drama films, but he's most well known for his horror films. These two films being that. But I would say the two biggest films of his career that he's most well known is The House on Haunted Hill, 13, and also 13 Ghosts. And I think these films are also very, very popular. But yeah, amazing stuff. So please check out anything by William Castle, and especially Homicidal, 1961. This is Jason Dean. Thanks again for your support. And if you like this channel, please subscribe and keep the comments coming. Thank you again. Have a great day. Peace.